Welcome to the Transfer Pricing Method, the podcast where we break down the complexities of transfer pricing with top industry leaders. I'm Adriaan van Heijden, and transfer pricing isn't just a profession to me, it's my passion. Today I'm joined by two well-known guests within the transfer pricing world. First, we have Borys Ulanenko. He's the founder of Arm's Length AI, a text technology company applying AI to automate complex transfer pricing tasks such as benchmarking, functional analysis, and documentation. He has over a decade of experience across Big Four advisory, in-house roles at Shell, and digital product development. Joining us as well is Maikel Verhoeven, Managing Director of Quantera Global. Maikel has been with Quantera Global since its inception, playing a key role in its growth and development before stepping into his current leadership role in 2022. Maikel also spent a year as interim transfer pricing specialist at ASML. In today's episode, we'll be exploring the future of our beloved profession, and we'll discuss geopolitical and legislative developments, technology, and the impact on our profession. It seems also to impact my day-to-day work, so I'm very curious what you have to say to the listeners today. So let's dive in. Our first topic of today is the geopolitical landscape. A lot has happened this year. Borys, with more uncertainty and trade tensions back in the headlines, what should transfer pricing teams do right now, given this uncertainty?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And thanks everyone for listening to us today. Yeah, it's a good question. What should you do? I think you should continuously follow the news to some reasonable degree. No doom scrolling, but transfer pricing doom scrolling. We'll be checking what OECD have published this week. But just continuously following the developments is something that I think I have observed happening to us since especially Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 discussions have started, right? So before that, the landscape was more or less stable. Now it's changing and evolving over time, especially considering like that major parties cannot align on most of the parameters of the reform still. We just had this G7 or news about G7 alignment on Pillar 2, which doesn't look like alignment to most. But if you're in in-house shoes and you are managing transfer pricing for your multinational, I think the best thing you can do is probably to revisit as soon as possible your current transfer pricing setup, identify how flexible your transfer pricing policies are, and probably you've already done that considering how tariffs have impacted some of the supply chains, but maybe you're still not there because you're just like not impacted as much by tariffs because you're selling digital or just services. And considering like how adequate your policies are, how flexible they are, and also the operational transfer pricing aspect of it. And I think probably Maikel would be better to talk about operational transfer pricing aspect.
Yeah, good one. Perhaps Maikel, I think as leader of Quantera Global's operational transfer pricing team, do you think this also has a significant impact on operational TP, as Boris mentioned?
Yeah, so especially the tariffs, obviously. So we're pre-tariffs, and I think also more products fall within the custom duties now than in the past. That, of course, makes the topic more important as such, and also the individual pricing more key. So where in the past, maybe the operational transfer pricing was mainly focused on making TP adjustments at year end or quarterly end. Now, especially when that pricing is also used for custom duties, that pricing becomes way more important. And you want to track that more proactively and see also what you may be able to unbundle and have a sort of joint partnership with custom duties and the TP expert to see what makes sense and what you can do to make your business flow well.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps another important geopolitical event that happened 5 years ago, the COVID pandemic. Obviously, this had a huge impact on society, Boris. Do we still see the impact of this on transfer pricing? For example, post-pandemic remote work patterns.
Yeah, I think that there is definitely some lasting impact in a sense of more people working from home than they used to. However, I had a chance to talk to a lot of transfer pricing and general tax leaders in large multinationals, and not necessarily even tax people, but generally employees of those companies. Those companies were very proactive in allowing their workforce to work from home during pandemic, and they are still pretty much in hybrid mode or still fully remote, a lot of them. But at the same time, they enacted quite stringent rules on who is allowed to work from home and who is not, and what work from home means, which typically envisions quite significant limitations not to create that international tax exposure, meaning creating PE and other issues for the company. And considering all that, and if you look at this broader picture, I think the impact that we have observed at the end of the day was pretty limited. I know there was a lot of discussion, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, but there was also an expectation that more companies will go fully remote and will allow for fully distributed workforce. I don't think that has happened to a degree that we have, or some have expected. Therefore, I think it's pretty limited. But I'm also aware probably of some industry-specific and some factors that may make this picture quite different.
Yeah. Maikel, anything to add?
Yeah, so I think it's also there are of course employee tax or personal income tax considerations, but from a transfer pricing perspective, I think it's also good to, as Boris I think pointed out earlier, to make your model flexible and that it can flex with the business. Quite some TP models are quite stringent that you cannot have certain functions in a certain jurisdiction, for example. But you can also design it in such a way and also to align your operational transfer pricing in such a way that it can sort of give more freedom to the business on where to hire people and how to operate.
Okay. Thank you both. Let's move on to the next topic, the legislative developments. Maikel, we see a lot of tax authorities implementing specific transfer pricing forms. What do you expect as the background of this development?
Yeah, so likely they just want to build up data and then based on the data do more precise audits. And I guess also when they build the data over time, then they will also be more capable on conducting the right audits and seeing like which audits were successful, etc. So it's, I guess, likely that over time more precise audits will take place. I think, for example, for Denmark, they implemented then also the full documentation that has to be submitted. And they also lowered their tax rate, but they increased their corporate income tax revenue. So it's also that aspect, I think, that the more stringent tax authorities are on transfer pricing, typically the more profit falls in that jurisdiction, although that shouldn't be the case, obviously. But yeah, I think it's the same with India, that typically tax TP professionals are a bit more cautious with India to let a bit more profit fall in that jurisdiction. So.
Okay, some interesting thoughts. Borys, also on data abundance. I think both tax authorities and taxpayers have much more data available than they used to have. How does this change the way we work? And are there any adjustment needed on how we think about transfer pricing?
Yeah, I think we need to change our mind about how we perceive it. I think the basic assumption of every transfer pricing professional is that like they have all the inside knowledge about the company, about their transactions, about their policies, about their TP models, and how profits are ultimately allocated. And tax authorities will communicate on a more transactional basis, where they will ask us for a documentation, we will provide it. They will know this piece for this year. Then we will provide, we will submit a TP form. They will have this high-level overview of our transactions, etc. However, I don't think that's the case anymore, right? So we have public CBCR, which gives you a high-level picture. You now have TP forms, which are getting more and more detailed. I'm originally coming from the jurisdictions, or was working with jurisdictions that had TP forms that are very detailed for quite a long time already. For example, in Poland, you have extremely detailed TP forms. And then you just, again, if you're like running a little bit ahead, but if you think about AI and AI being able to analyze even from open source information, giving you a lot of context about every business and every company, you can get not on par as a tax authority. You can get on almost on par with taxpayer in terms of like the knowledge of the business and the nuance, considering all those data. Simultaneously, tax authorities are still pretty restricted in terms of resources they have. But I think as a combination of factors, you have more data coming from more reporting requirements, more data coming from open source or just open internet. And then at the same time, you have AI, which tax authorities obviously haven't used yet at scale, especially for transfer pricing analysis and audit identification of risky areas, for example. But once this all comes together, and it will come together, we don't know how fast it will be. Tax authorities are not very fast typically with this type of innovation, but it will come. We know that some tax authorities are already looking at products like ours to automate certain steps with AI. I think then this disparity between in-house versus tax authority will almost go away. And you need to assume that what you do now will be visible to tax authorities in a few years. And since they are looking retrospectively, again, typically during every audit, you kind of should work from the assumption that they will see everything. I think that would be a fair, low risk thing to do now.
It's a fair and safe assumption indeed. Maikel, do you see the geopolitical uncertainty also impacting draft legislation and publications currently made by the OECD and European Commission?
Yeah, so I think there is less consensus, or I think now there's quite some uncertainty about Pillar 2 while it has been implemented, for example. Pillar 1 Amount A is also not going very fast, to put it mildly. And also the EU put also some proposals forward which haven't materialized. So I think there's also a bit of pushback from the M&E community that it's just too much of legislative proposals. So I think it should be good if would be good if the EU and also the OECD would be a bit more careful with selecting like which proposal are we going to propose. Also, for example, with Amount B, it was proposed basically to give less compliance costs to M&Es, and ultimately it costs more basically because there is no consensus eventually on the topic. And then there's obviously, but it's maybe always the case, but now maybe even more than earlier, a lot of pressure on budgets from countries because of the war, Ukraine, etc.
Yeah, a lot has happened and is happening currently. I think you mentioned a few pillars. Boys, on the digital services tax and Amount A, what clashes or double tax risks should multinationals prepare for during these years?
Yeah, it's hard to say what should they prepare for considering how fast it changes. So we have this G7 announcement, or like unofficial announcement, I think, still, as we are talking today about, and then digital services tax are assumed to be repealed, I think, from that, at least from that insider views that we've got. So like, how do you adapt to that when now Canada has digital service tax, and then maybe in a couple of years or even a few months they may not have anymore? It's hard to prepare. I think you need to just assume that I'm pretty sure that transfer pricing guys in M&Es that are digital are following it much very carefully and do have remedy plans for everything. For general population of transfer pricing professionals that not as specialized, have as specialized M&Es, I think it's still very difficult to prepare for everything that is coming. Like, let's take Pillar 2 as an example. I've started observing companies, technology companies especially, just like double-clicking on transfer pricing technology, releasing transfer pricing software or Pillar 2 software like as early as 18 months ago or even earlier sometimes, which is like, for me, was a total madness, because how do you release a technology for something that is not yet even close to being finished, changing the form all the time, and it was never done manually even once, right? I think like my approach to technology, which I think makes sense, that you need to do things first couple of times manually before you can automate anything, right? And so I think at this point, I would definitely not recommend automating anything crazily and allocating ridiculous budgets to, like, let's say, Pillar 2 automation or other automation of the legislation that is quickly evolving and we don't know where it will go.
Good bridge towards the next topic, technology, basically. Borys already mentioned a few items, Maikel, but which technology function is most applicable to us as transfer pricing practitioners, and what are the main benefits of, for example, AI in this field?
Yeah, so I think for one, you have just the general AI functions that basically apply to each profession as transfer pricing. So, for example, you can use Perplexity for some initial research, for example. Then for more routine type of tasks, there are also a specialized tool as the one of Borys, for example, on benchmark studies. And then I think also on TP documentation, there is also a growing, offering basically of supporting tools. So I think those are the most common ones, I would say.
Okay. Thank you, Maikel. Borys, I think we all know the well-known tools like ChatGPT. Where do you see the future? Is it in ChatGPT, the general accessible tools, or more specialized solutions?
Yeah, I think the future is probably in both. So for, as Maikel had mentioned, ChatGPT is and will be, or its alternative will be the go-to tool for many of the tasks that you do on a daily basis, especially tasks that are not very repetitive, not very restricted, not very complex. Let's say draft an email, do a high-level research of certain topic, help me format this into that, generate for me this type of document or this type of formatting, give me a picture, illustration, diagram, right? So I think that's where we use it on a daily basis. And in transfer pricing profession, there are like ton of tasks like that when you need to write an email to your stakeholder and request something, when you need to draft a proposal as a transfer pricing advisor, and you want AI to sense check what you wrote and make sure that it's accurate and it's written well, right? It doesn't make sense to create or have a special tool for drafting this type of proposals, right? You just can go with the standard ChatGPT. At the same time, there are certain workflows and certain types of work, which is probably like 60 or 70% of the actual transfer pricing work, where ChatGPT and general AI tools are not really helpful as much. For example, benchmarks, right, which we started with when we started Arm's Length AI. You have a very repetitive workflow, so you have you need to do this benchmark review for hundreds of companies. You want to do that simultaneously. You want to do that with a minimum human impact. You don't want to sit and copy paste stuff from ChatGPT and to ChatGPT for hundreds of companies. You want it to follow certain logic, certain steps. You want it to capture certain type of information and save it in a specific format. So that's where generic AI tool just doesn't work like you would want it to work. And the same if you look at transfer pricing compliance and documentation, ChatGPT can draft you pieces of local file, and probably you can to a certain degree draft one local file together with it. But if you want to reuse the same information from one local file to another one, if you want it in a specific format, if you don't want to provide instruction every time, if you want to have consistency, double checks, and you just want it to really work in your specific workflow, again, ChatGPT is just not, and then it's repetitive, of course, right? So we just look at the use cases which are repetitive and specialized enough, and the ones where ChatGPT just doesn't work as well, as good as you would want it to be. And those use cases, there are plenty of them in transfer pricing. That's where we think that AI is going to be, you need to have a specialized solution to work there.
Yeah, and the bottlenecks, I think data is one, but can you perhaps tell our listeners something on that, Borys?
Yeah, I think context and data is one of the limitations, which, especially with generic tools, like let's say ChatGPT, right? And you're a huge multinational which has like 500 subsidiaries, 30 TP policies, 50 benchmarking studies, ton of Excels with transactions and other information. Like can't realistically use ChatGPT for creating one additional local file without providing it with all the context that is relevant. Providing all the context which is relevant is requiring you as a human go and select it, or you need to rely on AI to do the search, but it's again like not very reliable because it doesn't know the full picture, the full structure, etc. Right? So this bottleneck of the right context, right data that AI gets, and then obviously from its own knowledge, it doesn't know much about your internal affairs and transfer pricing policies. Hallucinations is another risk. I think like modern models like GPT-4o, since GPT-4o and Claude, latest generation models as well, no amount of hallucinations from models themselves dropped significantly, but you still have this search process where AI would go and search through the sources and information, and this is less reliable or like just not very reliable algorithm still, and then it may search and find something that is less relevant or something that may be outdated, etc. Right? And then you have as an output, you've got hallucinations. It's not like the hallucination in the sense that it made up things. It just maybe found the wrong context and put it in the wrong place, and then it's just wrong output basically of chat. And then data security, I think, is still high on the agenda for many companies. However, I think mostly already we are past this stage where everyone were very concerned about that, because most of the companies like OpenAI, like ourselves, came up with the reasonable measures that ensure that all the information is sealed. Companies feel much more secured about providing information and context to AI because they know that it's not going to be reused for training and just will be sealed to their environment, I think. But you need to bear this in mind, of course.
Okay, thank you, Boris. As final topic of today, we'd like to discuss the future of our profession. Maikel, how do you envision the typical day of a transfer pricing professional will look like in 5 years from now?
More fun, I think. So I think that's a good future to be in. So I think the more basic tasks will be automated or supported. So I think that will ultimately lead that you, at least I think most TP professionals like to do more the TP design, also discussing with tax authorities, maybe supporting clients in audits or obtaining APAs or bilateral APAs and those type of things. Yeah, those cannot really be automated, so those will naturally be more at the forefront that in-house tax professionals will need support with that. And then I think also that the benefit of that is also that you basically get more strategic work. So it may also be a bit of a shift there that it depends on the type of person you are. But I think on the other hand, it may also be that in-house people may also have, some of them may still have a compliance focus, but then still use various tools to make that service or a managed service sort of way more efficient. So then it's also still the value add part. I think that's where you have to be searching for, and I think it's good for each TP professional to develop themselves also in technological skills.
Yeah, okay. You had me at the start, more fun. So that really sounds good. But a follow-up question on that, Maikel. I think if the groundwork is being done by AI, I think we all started as junior. How do you make sure that juniors still grasp all the fundamentals of transfer pricing? Because you have to basically do it differently now.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's also may depend a little bit on person by person basis, but I think there are quite also some, probably also some courses available. People can research also themselves more easily now. So at least if you have a question where you may have to ask a senior before, now you can also ask, or at least in time, I think you can ask also an AI tool and then get a little bit of grasp, like explain me the basics or things like that. So that helps. I think you will have also on an hourly basis, so to say, more exposure to more sort of critical TP work. And then there are probably also some TP professionals that may have quite some knowledge on transfer pricing, but may have less knowledge on technology. And there, the sort of nice or fun situation may also exist that you as a junior can support that senior on how to use tools and be way faster in preparing stuff, while that senior then can also explain you like the nuances of transfer pricing. So I think that might be a win-win situation for both.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Borys, I think, Maikel perhaps already discussed a few, but which skills are most relevant for transfer pricing professionals to develop themselves in the coming years?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's really hard to answer because things are changing so fast, but we can be pretty much sure that interpersonal skills and communication skills and being able to network and find connections if you're working for multinational, find connections in-house, build this relationship with your stakeholders, know where to get certain piece of data, building those alliances. I think that is an absolutely skill that will become even more important as more technical or boring skills, or well, not skills, but tasks are being automated, like benchmarks, compliance, documentation, etc. This becomes more critical just because we will have plenty of that automated, and then the relative value of other things grow. If you want to go into like more technical skills, I think still having this transfer pricing fundamental overview of transfer pricing and being really good transfer pricing professional, having this holistic view of transfer pricing is still very important, and will be very important, and will be probably more important as AI does all the groundwork. You need someone who has a big picture in mind, has a good grasp of how transfer pricing work on high level, and can validate tactical tasks that AI is doing. So I'm kind of scared of the way of the direction our education now goes, with AI being able to do everything that students are asked to do, right? And then like, how do you make sure that they actually learn stuff and they actually know stuff, especially if they don't have as much or will not have as much ground technical work to do, like draft those local files. I know that's not the most fun job, or do benchmarks, but we know that people had to go through it because otherwise they wouldn't be able to produce the output that will look at that. And now you have someone who comes up with you with a perfect local file, but the person may just like have no idea what transfer pricing really is, right? But they may be very proficient at AI. So finding this balance, if you're really serious about being transfer pricing professional, I think investing in your transfer pricing education is still fundamental. And of course, technical skills like data and a little bit of programming with Python, for example, I think also very helpful, especially as AI can help you build any automation nowadays. But having those fundamentals in place, a little bit of like Python for Everybody course on Coursera, will open so many doors to automation in any sphere now with AI, that I think that would also be amazing. So to summarize, I think it's communication and soft skills and being able to network and build partnerships. The second one would be still transfer pricing fundamentals, and I think that may be also a differentiating factor as more people are less educated on transfer pricing over time, because AI does most of education for you. And of course, a little bit of automation skills, a little bit of coding skills that can help you do some low-level automation in your job. I think that would be a very strong back of.
Okay, thank you both. I'll try to summarize what we discussed today, and please feel free to add anything that I might miss. I think a lot of developments that impact our work, such as Pillar 1, Pillar 2, AI, tariffs, etc. Solid operational transfer pricing is also becoming more crucial and becoming more relevant considering custom duties as well. TP models should be designed also in a flexible manner that you can adjust where necessary. Transparency is being enforced more. Think of CBCR, transfer pricing forms, master file, local file, etc. For AI, find the right use cases. You have several tools in place, and each tool has its own usefulness. There are some bottlenecks using AI, but that should not stop you from using this in your day-to-day work. The transfer pricing profession will change, but the more boring tasks and groundwork will be handled by AI, so it will definitely become more fun. Finally, I think communication, soft skills, and some technical skills are also becoming more crucial. Did I miss anything, guys?
No,
I think it's a
quite
good
good.
summary.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
better
you.
than ChatGPT would do it.
Ah,
Yeah.
good to know. Thank you for that, Boris. And also thank you, Michael, both for contributing to this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. For even deeper insights into transfer pricing strategies, industry trends, and expert analysis, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you for listening in. I'll see you in the next episode of the Transfer Pricing Method podcast.
Thank you.